Hi, I'm Kirn. I'm a musician. I'm also a writer, a technologist. I teach and do some consulting, but I'm interested in the ways that music and technology come together, and also the ways that creative technology can influence interface design. So musicians are often some of the first people to want to play around with this stuff. The Kinect camera now we've had for a few years, and we musicians were really eager to get our hands on camera tracking. People had already been playing around with this stuff already. The chance to have a commodity camera that had all of the 3D depth sensing features that the Kinect had was very, very exciting to all of us. And the nice thing about this camera is musicians need to have lots and lots of devices to play with. Just having one amazing gimmick isn't quite enough. If you think of the guitar or the piano, it's after lots and lots of us get access to this thing that we can really take advantage of it. So you see as I walk in front of the camera, I become visible to it. And so today I'm using software that some other people are also using. It's called NIMate. And it's going to allow me to use the Kinect to control my music software, which in this case is Ableton Live. And we have no sound connection. Audio. As a music demo, it needs sound via an old-fashioned technology called the cable. Okay, let's try that again. So now that you can hear what I'm hearing, can I have more volume as well? Even more. This is the gesture that communicates to the booth rather than to the camera. Part of what the camera allows us to do is we can now use gestures to navigate musical ideas. And you'll see that can be quite simple. What's floating around me are a series of triggers, so they're acting basically like buttons. But I can also use gestures to control and shape the sound. So as musicians, we kind of come up with, sometimes we're playing instruments the way that we play a piano, where a gesture immediately results in a sound. What DJs and composers are doing as well is working with sound in a way that can also shape it in larger periods of time. So I might take this sound and just shape the color of it over time, or navigate through the music. Different sections. There's more bass if we're in a club, so just imagine that there's thumping, that kind of style bass. And the difference between this and the normal way of working is I can do all of this without touching any physical controller. So people are using this with dancers. They're using it to create different kinds of ways of moving through the music, and so on. If it looks kind of like the game movements that people were doing, part of the reason was there was a convergence between people making music and people working on games. So some of even the game designers got in on this. One of the common pieces of software people are using was actually developed by a friend of mine who'd been working at Harmonix. And so even the game developers, the people working on Xbox during the day, were so excited by this that at night they went home and coded even more at the end of their day jobs, just to say, what if I could take these gestures into clubs? Okay. This is how you know it's a live performance too. I was actually a bit nervous about that. So this is the older Kinect camera. So we're talking a lot about what newness. We're talking about new things a lot today. A lot of this stuff is cyclical. So it's actually taken a few years of playing around with this first Kinect camera for people to work out what to do with it. And amazing things have happened. These cameras are showing up everywhere. So I've done work with dancers and choreographers. Part of what's nice about this is 150 euros, and you can drop it in a backpack. So if you're working with dancers, you can stick it in a backpack and go to a rehearsal studio with a dancer and try out different ideas. If you're a musician, this is something that you can bring along with other equipment, DJ mixers and things like that, and work with that. So availability is as important as novelty. And we're also likewise excited about the new Xbox camera. And Microsoft is doing wonderful things in open sourcing the tools that they use and working with this community of open source developers, so that the new camera that's coming out for Windows is something that musicians will be able to be more expressive with. As you may have picked up, there are things that aren't quite perfect. The camera can't see our body as clearly and articulately as we can. So the ability to work together as an open community is vitally important. And it's those collaborations between us, sharing tools, sharing code, sharing ideas, trying to one-up each other sometimes in videos, that I think is so important. Musicians have done that for years. It's not so much that this is something that has just happened this year. Musicians have been trying to work with natural interaction for a century now. Leon Theremin, the Russian inventor, was one of the first people to begin allowing you to relate to the machine just by moving your body, without necessarily having to reach out and turn a knob or pull a lever, but being able to use human gestures and allow the machine to respond to you the way that you or I might respond to each other when we're together in a room. Here's an example of that. This is Clara Rockmore performing with the theremin, an invention that is now about 100 years old. And I should still have sound somehow. So this is the other way to work with human gestures, and like I said, it is a century old. Subtle movements of the hands, in this case, are able to affect the pitch of the sound and the loudness of the sound. And just those two very simple parameters is enough to realize a classical piece of music. In many ways, this technology is still better than the new one. So part of this process of cyclical iteration is a matter of catching up with where we were and then improving on it. The new Xbox sensor is faster and more precise, which was some of the advantages of the original theremin. What it can do that the theremin can't is understand the human body, the position of the skeleton, the position of the hands, and so on. So I think when the performance of this centuries-old instrument and the centuries and centuries of classical music tradition meet up with better and better analysis of images, I just set off my camera again, then we will, and it understands things like that. It can't read my mind, maybe. I think something really exciting will happen. The last thing I want to show you from a musical perspective is going the other direction. So I hope that you've all been tweeting. I also hope that my internet connection is working. We'll take a look at it. Not exactly. Let's try again. We will use your tweets if the internet is cooperating with me. Yes. To go the opposite direction. So in addition to music giving us some cues for how we can work with natural interaction, to be able to use gestures to navigate lots of information and imagery and expressive ideas, we can also use music and sound in the opposite direction, to take these rivers of data that we have and turn them into something that we can understand through different senses and perceptions. So this is just some processing code that is going out to the Twitter feed, the hashtag Next14 right now, and it's going to try to make some music out of it. Let's see what happens, because it is live. So whatever you guys are saying is now going to turn into the music. And I'll still need my music on, sound on, of course. It's talking to the internet. Okay. So it's, and there we go. Here are the last 100 tweets with hashtag next14. And we can see those tweets coming up. So what I've done is the time interval between your tweets is now sped up slightly so that we can condense that time. But as you hear notes happen closer together, those are shorter intervals of time. See their little bursts where suddenly people are excited by something and all kind of tweet at once. We're also using the pitch to denote how cool the particular tweet was. I'm measuring that using the number of times it was retweeted and the number of times it's favorited. So you see these numbers are popping up down in this left-hand corner. So this is a very simple sketch. I'm going to put some code up on my website later this week if anybody wants to play around with other ways of using music. But what you find when you start musicalizing and not only visualizing data is you can pick up patterns in different ways. So there are things like really important tweets that have higher pitch that can kind of pop out. You can also have this sort of running in the background. And because music is something you can perceive all of the time, like we'll hear this in the background and keep sort of processing it in a way that you can't with visuals that you kind of have to look at, you will pick up some patterns that you might not notice otherwise. If Brian Eno is for some perverse reason watching this webcast, apologies to Brian Eno. This does sound a lot like a bad Brian Eno impression. But we're dynamically creating this music out of the data. And this uses a library, I should add, called libpd. There's a little musical instrument running inside my code that's making all of that happen. So if you want to talk to me, this is me, since I don't have a slide deck. If you want to tweet more and want to turn that into some kind of music. But thanks very much for allowing these couple of experiments.
Thank you. Thank you. That was excellent. Thank you very much.